From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 9 o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for starting your week with us. I'm Russ Riesinger. President Trump returned to the White House this evening, 3 days after he was hospitalized with COVID-19. In a video posted on Twitter, the president said he's feeling better and urged people not to fear the coronavirus. Skylar Henry has more from Washington.
President Trump emerged from Walter Reed Army Medical Center wearing a surgical mask. He flashed a thumbs up sign, then walked to his motorcade without assistance. After a short flight aboard Marine One, the president climbed the South Lawn stairs, then removed his mask and recorded a video message.
I learned so much about coronavirus, and one thing that's for certain, don't let it dominate you. Don't be afraid of it. You're going to beat it. We have the best medical equipment, we have the best medicines, all developed recently.
The president's doctor says he will continue to undergo treatment at the White House.
Though he may not entirely be out of the woods yet, the team and I agree that all our evaluations, and most importantly, his clinical status, support the president's safe return home.
Dr. Conley said the president would be closely monitored for the next week.
If we can get through to Monday with him remaining the same or improving, better yet, then we will all take that final deep sigh of relief.
At least 19 people with ties to the White House have tested positive for the coronavirus, including 2 Republicans on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Next week, it's slated to take up the Supreme Court nomination for Amy Coney Barrett.
This body will not cease to function just because Democrats are afraid they may lose a vote.
On Monday, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell postponed Senate floor activity for the next 2 weeks, but said the Supreme Court hearing will go forward as planned. Skylar Henry, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Well, today the CDC updated its website to acknowledge that under some conditions, people spread out farther than 6 feet can still become infected with the coronavirus via airborne transmission. Here in Yellowstone County, County Health Officer John Felton threatening tougher restrictions if COVID rates continue to climb. This past week, the positivity rate was 36 per 100,000 in Yellowstone County. If it climbs to 40 per 100,000 for the week of October 31st, tougher restrictions would go into place on November 2nd. Now, if that happens, it would mean group gatherings limited to 25 or fewer people, with the exception of schools, restaurants, and bars. With the exception of schools, restaurants and bars would be limited to 25% capacity, and establishments that sell alcohol would have to close by 10 p.m. Also, places of worship would be limited to 25% capacity.
Montanans have a strong sense of personal responsibility. This is our chance to prove that we care enough about the people in our community to be personally responsible for slowing the transmission of COVID-19. If we succeed together, we all enjoy the benefits of open businesses, open schools, and healthy family and friends. If we fail together, then all of us will suffer the effects of increased restrictions, more sickness, and more deaths.
There were 408 cases in the last week here in Yellowstone County. If that number jumps to 452 in a week's time, it means that we've exceeded the 40 per 100,000 positivity rate, and those additional measures would be taken. Now, if it should go to 50 at any time, Felton says the stricter restrictions would go into effect immediately. He also talked briefly about Halloween. It's not canceled, but it is strongly recommended that you forego any events that bring people from other households together. All 56 Montana counties have now confirmed coronavirus cases, the last to add one, Petroleum County. There are also 4 new deaths to report tonight, 1 victim in each of Bighorn, Cascade, Glacier, and Pend Oreille counties. That's a total of 195 deaths across Montana. The state reports 212 new confirmed cases. Yellowstone County with the highest count again today, 34. Total active cases is right around 5,000, and more than 10,000 Montanans have now recovered. Few details released after an apparent fight over dogs left a man dead in central Billings last night. The victim was shot in the head just before 8 o'clock in the 1300 block of Custer Avenue. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Police say an argument over the dogs escalated when the victim left the suspect's home and came back. Officers believe there may have been a struggle because the suspect had scratches on his head. No names or possible charges have been released. Officers say the victim was also armed with a gun. Well, the future's looking brighter for the Billings Mustangs after the team received nearly $500,000 in federal coronavirus relief money. Montana Governor Steve Bullock toured the Mustangs facility at Dealer Park today to find out where that money will be spent. Q2's Mitch Leahy brings us the story.
At Dealer Park in Billings, Montana Governor Steve Bullock got a tour of the baseball facility from Mustangs owner Dave Heller. The Billings baseball team received about $440,000 in coronavirus relief money allocated by the state government. Mustangs owner Dave Heller said today that that money is enough to help the Mustangs weather the COVID-19 pandemic. Over the past year, the Mustangs have been pitched two curveballs: the pandemic and contract negotiations between minor and Major League Baseball. Heller said the Mustangs likely won't take the field again until June 2021. That would be nearly 2 years that the Mustangs would see $0 in revenue from ticket sales or concessions. Heller said the grant money will help the team pay its $60,000 a year rent to the city to play at Dealer, along with maintenance and utility costs.
The combination of MLB doing contraction and the uncertainty that breeds, together with COVID-19, could have put the Mustangs out of business for good. And because of the state, I'm proud to be able to say to you all today that the Billings Mustangs will 100% definitely be playing next year in Dealer Park, right here. No questions asked, no doubt whatsoever.
Heller said he believes Major League Baseball will reach a deal on a contract with the minor league teams by the end of this year. In Billings, Mitch Leahy, MTN News.
Thanks, Mitch. Heller added that he will be able to start hiring back staff members as soon as the MLB releases a schedule. Governor Bullock also stopped by a couple critical infrastructure projects in our area. The first, the Lockwood Sewer and Water District. Last year, Bullock signed infrastructure bills to fund nearly $400 million in overdue sewer, water, bridges, buildings, and other public works projects. It was the first time the legislature had agreed on a statewide bond package in over a decade. And Bullock also checked in on the construction of the Yellowstone River Bridge segment of the Billings Bypass. The $100 million project is funded with federal and state dollars and expected to be completed in 2021. Bullock's team says last week $32 million in existing bonds were refinanced to take advantage of the lower interest rates and saved taxpayers some $7 million. As ballots are set to go out to many Montana voters this week, the campaign over marijuana legalization is heating up. MTN's Jonathan Ambarian tells us about new groups getting involved and the money getting spent.
In Helena Monday, several conservation organizations gathered to throw their support behind a proposal to legalize recreational marijuana in Montana. They pointed to the revenues it could raise for public lands.
Funding our public lands owned by the state of Montana. Places like this, these are the treasures of the treasure state. These votes are votes for those public lands.
Representatives from Montana conservation voters, the Montana Wildlife Federation, Wild Montana Action Fund, and the Trust for Public Land backed Initiative 190 and Constitutional Initiative 118 during an event at Spring Meadow Lake. I-190 would set up a regulated marijuana system, including a 20% tax on sales. CI-118 would let the state limit sales to those 21 and older. The measures would set aside nearly half of the marijuana tax revenue for public lands programs, primarily for improving wildlife habitat, but also for things like state parks and trails. Overall, a state analysis estimates Fish, Wildlife, and Parks could receive $19 million a year by 2025. Aaron Murphy of Montana Conservation Voters said the country is moving towards a more accepting view of marijuana.
So we see this as an opportunity that's coming our way no matter what. So we'd rather get ahead of it and make sure that our public lands get the funding from that they deserve.
Leaders with Wrong for Montana, a committee opposing the legalization effort, say they believe there would be negative impacts to making marijuana more available that wouldn't justify the extra revenue.
I don't see why we want to get an extra $25 million in our state coffers by addicting 110,000 Montanans to marijuana. That sounds crazy to me.
According to recently filed financial documents, New Approach Montana, the group behind the legalization initiatives, raised another $1.8 million in the last month. Much of that funding came from a national group called the North Fund, which has given nearly $5 million to the effort. Wrong for Montana filed finance documents for its first month. It brought in just over $78,000, including from groups like the Montana Family Foundation and Montana Contractors Association. It has spent much of that on billboards and digital ads. And Montanans can expect to see more about these initiatives in the coming weeks. New Approach Montana has already spent several $1 million reserving TV ad time for the month of October. In Helena, Jonathan Amberian, MTN News.
Ballots are set to be mailed to voters in most Montana counties on Friday. Democratic U.S. House candidate Kathleen Williams reported today that she raised $2.3 million in the past 3 months, almost doubling her total for the entire campaign. Williams is locked in what's expected to be a close race with Republican State Auditor Matt Rosendale for Montana's only U.S. House seat. The former state legislator from Bozeman ran for the same seat and lost in 2018 to Republican Congressman Greg Gianforte. Now that the seat is open because Gianforte is running for governor, Williams has now raised $4.7 million for the entire campaign, a considerable amount for a U.S. House contest in Montana. National groups on both sides are paying attention to the Montana seat, which hasn't been won by a Democrat since 1994. Rosendale hasn't yet released his fundraising total for the 3 months ending September 30th. Rosendale had raised $1.9 million through the end of July. Still ahead on the MTN 9 o'clock news, it's history in the making as two historic heavyweights are on the move. We're going to tell you where they're headed in just a bit. But first, Bob McGuire's in next with your full 7-day forecast.